They expected starvation. Instead, they got 3,600 calories a day. For the average German soldier in World War II, getting captured was a terrifying thought. It meant one of two things: a quick death on the battlefield or a slow, miserable end in a Siberian gulag. At least, that's what the propaganda told them. So when hundreds of thousands of German POWs were informed they were being shipped to the United States, they prepared for the worst. They imagined brutal forced labor, humiliation, and starvation, all at the hands of a nation their leaders called degenerate, weak, and on the verge of total collapse. They were bracing for a hell on earth. But hell never came. What they found waiting for them wasn't starvation or humiliation. It was a daily diet of 3,200 to 3,600 calories. It was a menu so full of fresh meat, dairy, sugar, and even luxuries like ice cream and Coca-Cola that they didn't just survive, they gained weight. Some men put on over 50 pounds during their time in captivity. This is the incredible story of how America's most surprising and effective weapon against Nazi ideology wasn't a bomb or a tank, it was a dinner plate. It's the story of how overwhelming abundance and basic human decency did what no amount of force could. It completely changed the hearts and minds of the enemy. Chapter 1: The world they knew and the lies they were told. To really get the shock these men felt, you have to understand the world they just left. Nazi Germany was a society built on an architecture of lies, masterfully run by propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. And a main target of that propaganda was the United States. German soldiers, most of them young men who grew up knowing nothing but the Third Reich, were taught to hate America. They were told it was a decadent, decaying nation, hopelessly weakened by racial mixing, a mongrel society that lacked the purity of the Aryan race. They heard its people were soft and lazy, and its political system was a chaotic mess. The propaganda machine insisted American industrial power was a complete myth. Goebbels' narrative claimed the Great Depression had permanently wrecked the U.S. economy. Newsreels showed American workers on strike as proof the nation was collapsing from the inside. The message was clear: America was a paper tiger that would fold at the first sign or real fight. This narrative was hammered home by the grim realities of life in Germany. On the home front, the war took a heavy toll. While pre-war Germany had a per capita food supply of around 3,000 calories, the war changed everything. Official rations for civilians plummeted, and even those weren't guaranteed. For many, actual daily consumption fell between 1,200 and 1,700 calories, with meals of watery turnip soup and bread bulked out with sawdust. Meat was a rare luxury. Real coffee was a distant memory, replaced by ersatz substitutes made from roasted acorns. Even the soldiers on the front lines, who were supposed to get priority, faced a logistical nightmare. The official ration was meant to be around 3,600 calories, but by 1943, the reality on many fronts was closer to 1,500 or 1,800 calories a day. In brutal places like the Eastern Front, soldiers survived on a fraction of that, facing constant gnawing hunger. The German war machine was failing at its most basic job, feeding its own men. This was the world that nearly 425,000 German soldiers, many captured from Rommel's Afrika Korps, were leaving behind. They were malnourished, exhausted, and completely indoctrinated. They carried a potent mix of fear and arrogance, fear of their captors and arrogance from a lifetime of being told they were superior. They were about to come face to face with the truth, and the collision between propaganda and reality would begin at sea. Chapter 2: The Journey West and the First Cracks in the Facade. For most German POWs, the journey began in dusty holding pens in North Africa, and right away, things felt off. Instead of beatings and starvation, they were processed and given American field rations. For men who'd been living on scraps in the desert, the sudden arrival of pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk was just bewildering. These were foods that had vanished from Germany years ago. But the real shock came on the voyage across the Atlantic. The prisoners were loaded on Liberty ships, vessels themselves a form of counter-propaganda. These weren't fancy warships, they were simple, mass-produced cargo ships, and that was the point. The The Germans were stunned to learn the Americans were churning these out at a terrifying rate, sometimes building a ship in a matter of weeks, with the record being under 5 days. The sheer number of these ships, which would otherwise have returned to the US empty, made it cheaper to transport prisoners to America than to ship food to Europe. Aboard these ships, the Geneva Convention was followed to the letter. This meant prisoners received the same rations as the American soldiers guarding them. One German officer, Lieutenant Heinrich Huber, wrote about his disbelief. He watched American sailors scrape huge, uneaten portions of their meals into the ocean. The sight of perfectly good food being thrown away was just incomprehensible to a man whose troops had survived on scavenged dates. The daily ration he got on that ship was a feast of fresh food, clocking in at around 3,500 calories. And it wasn't just him. Tens of thousands of prisoners had the same experience. They were given real coffee with as much sugar as they wanted. They saw 100-pound bags of sugar stacked in the galley, enough to sustain a small German town for a month. They ate white bread, butter, and jam. They had meat not once a week, but often multiple times a day. This wasn't just food, it was evidence. It was the first undeniable proof that the world Goebbels had described was a lie. How could a nation on the brink of collapse have so much food it could just throw it away? As the ships neared the American coast, another symbol appeared. At night, the soldiers looked out and saw not the mandatory blackouts that covered every city in Europe, but a coastline blazing with light. The glow of illuminated cities showed they were entering a world that war hadn't touched, a world that didn't live in fear. It was a world of defiant, unapologetic power. By the time they set foot on American soil, their decade of conditioning was already starting to fracture. Chapter 3: The American Dream Behind Barbed Wire. From the ports, the prisoners boarded trains to one of around 700 POW camps scattered across 46 states. The shocks just kept coming. Instead of being packed into cattle cars, they sat in comfortable passenger cars, the same kind American civilians used. Peering out the windows, they saw a country in motion. Endless fields of grain, bustling towns, and highways filled with civilian cars, a sight unheard of back home, where private vehicle use had been eliminated. When they arrived at camps like Camp Hearn in Texas or Camp Concordia in Kansas, the real culture shock began. The centerpiece of it all was the food. The Geneva Convention dictated that prisoners receive rations equivalent to the base's garrison troops. For the Germans, this meant a daily intake of 3,200 to over 4,000 calories. So, what did a day of eating actually look like? One NCO described a typical breakfast: oatmeal with milk and sugar, scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with real butter and jam, and coffee with cream. That one meal had more luxuries than a German family saw in a week. Lunch could be Salisbury steak with gravy, mashed potatoes, and a slice of apple pie. For dinner, maybe fried chicken, rice, and green beans. They were given merely 3/4 of a pound of meat and a quart of milk every single day. At the camp canteens, they could buy ice cream, chocolate, and soft drinks like Coca-Cola. This staggering amount of food led to a startling physical transformation. Many men arrived severely malnourished. In one documented case, a prisoner who weighed a skeletal 128 pounds at his capture was a healthy 185 pounds after 2 years in an American camp, a gain of 57 pounds. They had expected starvation. Instead, they were getting fat. And life outside the mess hall was just as strange. Facing a labor shortage, America put tens of thousands of POWs to work in agriculture and factories. But this wasn't slave labor. They were paid for it, up to 80 cents a day in scrip they could spend at the canteen. The very idea of being paid by the enemy was baffling. This work also brought them into daily contact with American civilians. German-American farmers who spoke their language worked alongside them in the fields. They saw that these weren't propaganda monsters, just people. POWs were often invited to share midday meals in the farmers' homes. One former POW, Gunter Grave, returned to the US 73 years just to say thank you, stating that being captured by Americans was the luckiest time of his life. For many, the camps became a golden cage. They organized soccer leagues, formed orchestras, and had access to libraries with books that were banned in Germany.
It was a quiet, powerful demonstration of a free and open society.
Chapter 4: A New Perspective and the Crumbling of Ideology. The combination of all this, the endless food, the fair treatment, the contact with ordinary Americans, started to work a profound change on the prisoners. It was re-education by reality. Every meal was a direct contradiction of Nazi propaganda. The daily milk, the piles of meat, the sweet desserts, they weren't just food, they were facts. The prisoners knew their own families were surviving on turnip stew and bread filled with sawdust. They knew their weekly meat ration back home was less than what they got in a single day. A massive question began to form in their minds. How could the decadent and collapsing America produce such a staggering abundance, while the superior and efficient Third Reich couldn't even feed its own people? The answer was all around them. They saw it in the mechanized farms, in the factories that ran 24/7, and in the fact that ordinary American farmers often lived better than German aristocrats. The ideological pillars of Nazism, built on ideas of German superiority, began to crumble under the sheer weight of evidence. The letters they sent home, often coded, spread quiet whispers of an American reality that was nothing like the official story. Working beside American civilians, they saw a society where people could openly criticize their own president without fear of being dragged away in the night, a concept totally alien to them. Inside the camps, die-hard Nazis tried to enforce ideological purity, sometimes with violence, but they were fighting a losing battle. It's hard to maintain a fervent belief in the master race when your daily life is proof of its failure. The escape rate from the camps was less than 1%, a telling sign that for many, life behind the wire was better than anything they'd known before. This transformation wasn't the result of some sophisticated American plan. Official re-education programs were small and largely ineffective. The real change came from a nation simply being itself. America defeated Nazi ideology in the minds of these 425,000 men, not with lectures, but with Salisbury steak, apple pie, and a bottle of Coke. When the war in Europe ended, the POWs were eventually sent back to a continent in ruins and a homeland that was physically and morally shattered. They returned to the very starvation they had been spared in America, but they did not return as the same men. These soldiers became unwitting ambassadors for a different way of life. They had seen with their own eyes that American power wasn't just its military, but its incredible capacity to produce, and the fundamental decency it showed even to its enemies. They had seen a functioning democracy up close, and they never forgot it. In the difficult years of post-war reconstruction, these former prisoners played a crucial, often overlooked role. They helped modernize German agriculture. They became leaders in their communities, advocating for the democratic principles they'd once been taught to despise. Their stories were more credible than any official denazification program because they were Germans who had seen the truth for themselves. The story of the German POWs in America is a remarkable testament to the power of soft power. It's a story where generosity was more strategically effective than cruelty. It proved that the ideals of a free society produce tangible results, a nation that can build bombers and still have enough left over to serve its enemies ice cream. The greatest victory America won over these men wasn't on the battlefield, but in the mess halls and farm fields of the heartland, where the seeds of a new democratic Germany were sown, one 3,600-calorie meal at a time. If you found this story of unexpected history surprising, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into the forgotten chapters of the past. And let us know in the comments what other historical myths you'd like to see explored. Thanks a lot for subscribing, liking, and commenting on our video.